Welcome back, everyone, to Afrodo Reviews. Now, on this channel, I help you decide. Is that worth reading over a second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? That's what we're here to decide. Dust Decay is a book published by Jonathon Maberry on August 30th of 2011, and is the sequel to a previous book I read on this channel, Rotten Rune. Now, fun fact. This time I actually learned a bit more about this series, courtesy of a video from About the Author's TV channel on YouTube, of which I'll provide a link down below in my description, probably right below my Discord link. But the Rotten Rune series was actually created to be part of an anthology series called The New Dead. A series that I've had on my book for a couple years and never realized. He said that he wrote the first chapter of what would later become Rotten Rune in it. And when the short story was very positively received, he was called up by his agent and basically convinced to turn the story into a young adult novel, who told him that this short story sounded a lot like the first chapter in what would become Rotten Rune. Which, I mean, obviously I couldn't help myself, so I pulled this out, read through it, and yeah. It reads like the first chapter of Rotten Rune. Like, I'd actually have to probably take a fine-tooth comb and go through the short story to tell you if he made any changes from there to here, effectively. At the time, Maberry admits that he had really no idea what a young adult novel was, and said that his last experience with one was To Kill a Mockingbird. He admits that he thinks a part of the reason this book was so well received for its time is for two reasons. Well, yeah, two parts of the reason, I guess I should say. One is that he took the risk and made Benny Amura unlikable at the start. And the second is that he feels he was one of the few young adult authors at the time who had a male protagonist in his series. Which I actually find it pretty hard to disagree with. Many of the young adult books tend to favor female protagonists over male. Out of curiosity, and based on my own memory, I do remember that being true in middle school and high school. And out of curiosity, I did double check on the young adult novels that I had read for this channel by going through the 24 books that I had in my Goodreads young adult tag on my profile, and only about a third of them had male protagonists. So it's not hard to see where Jonathon Maberry actually probably would have thought this. It was just something interesting that I thought I'd share, so anyway, here's the report card. Puppy's back in my lap, so if I'm distracted this video, that's part of why. Why do you need to lick the inside of my knee? And now on to the cover. Now the cover is just like Rotten Rune. For the most part, it quite literally is the same cover. It's just featuring a screaming girl, likely Lila, based on the white hair. And this time, the center where the color starts is the mouth, rather than the eye. For the most part, I think all my comments from the first book apply to this one still. So I'm not really going to retread myself and just say it all over again. Plus, I gotta give you guys a reason to go back to that video. It's one of the few videos that hasn't been slowly increasing as the years go on. So let's go ahead and skip to the synopsis. Now, it's a bit late to say this, but I did publish a TBR for the month of July where I read the back of this book and dove into the synopsis presented on the back. As I've said before, I personally think that the synopsis on the back is an important facet of the reading experience, as this is the thing that many will build the foundation of their expectation on. If you'd like to see how the book presents itself, I put a link up above, and I recommend you go checking it out. I also recommend checking out the first review, as I talk a bit about, and some of it will be relevant to this review, about some of the things I critique about this book. But for the sake of context of this review, the things you need to remember from the first book are... Stop it. The things you need to remember... I'm going to bite you. I am going to bite you. For the sake of context of this review, the thing you need to know from the first book is that a young Benny Amura was training to be a closure expert or a bounty hunter in a post-apocalyptic wasteland filled with zombies. After a bounty hunter that Benny respected more than his brother Tom, named Charlie Pinkeye, and his best friend the Hammer, kidnap Benny's crush, Nix Riley, and kill Nix's mom, They go out to chase after them. They find out this was largely over a girl named the Lost Girl from the zombie trading card thing they got going on. Ben and Tom go into the waste to save Nix from Gameland, a place where psychopaths make a living by forcing people, especially kids, to fight zombies for their entertainment. Along the way, Benny finds Lila, the Lost Girl, and the three of them not only save Nix, but destroy Gameland in the process, kill Charlie and the Hammer, and, most importantly, they see the impossible. A jet plane that soars overhead, as if someone is telling them society has survived somewhere else. Now, the book mostly follows that storyline, where Nix and Benny have been training for 7 months, ready to leave the safety of their community to go find that jet airplane. Joining them in their training has been Chong, Benny's best friend from the first book, and Lila, the Lost Girl. The group has grown increasingly dissatisfied with Mountainside's complacency and unwillingness to advance in the threat of the zombie apocalypse, happy with remaining in stagnation in every way, from culturally to, the society. I guess society is the same thing as culturally. Anyways, after a creepy encounter with a roadside creature and a mysterious corpse that didn't rise as a zombie despite not having its brainstem destroyed, the group is separated. Chong, believing that he messed up by leaving the town and ashamed that he looks like a weak kid in front of Lila, who he has a major crush on, tries to go back home only to be kidnapped by bandits, forcing Tom to track him down. Nix, Benny, and Lila are then attacked by a zombie horde at their camp, basically their camping place, separating Benny and Nix from Lila and forcing the 3 separate groups in their own respective story, all while the legacy of Charlie Pink Eye looms over them. And that's about what I can provide without any spoilers to the book at large. So, the question then remains, what did I think of this book on a reread? Well, let's take off the rose-tinted glasses and address it. It's better than I remember, but also kind of worse, if that makes sense. So to start off, I think this is a very good sequel. Not only does it up the stakes, but the characters actually remember their character events. We see Benny and Nix change from the events of Rotten Ruin, unhappy with the complacency of their settlement Mountainside. We see multiple reactions to the Rotten Ruin from various perspectives, from the inexperienced explorer Chong is, to the hardened people of Nix and Benny, to the veteran optimist of Tom, and the nihilistic veteran optimist of Lila. I think the stakes of the story suitably shoot up as well, featuring a story that uses its event prior, but doesn't feel like a retread, and feels like a natural progression from the previous entry, with increasing stakes and consequences. The ending of this book is surprising in many ways, and I'm not sure how much else I can say on it without giving things away. We also see further mysteries, from the man who was killed and, unlike everyone else in the world, didn't turn into a zombie on his death, but we also see things like the virus itself seeming to mutate people who are already turned into zombies, getting faster and seemingly smarter. But also something seems to be scaring animals away from Yosemite, as animals like rhinoceroses and other things that have never been seen in this area are suddenly bungling into the area in larger and larger quantities. I think my favorite part of this book that expands on the previous work, however, similar to when I was a kid admittedly, is to see the other bounty hunters included. In the first book, we got a lot of references to the other bounty hunters out there, but apart from Tommy Amura, Charlie Pink Eye, and Marion the Hammer, well, I guess the City Hammer I think is what he's called, we didn't really see any in the main story. This book goes out of its way to introduce them to us in this one. My favorite as a kid was Sally Two Knives, for much the same reason I admittedly liked Thalia so much in The Titan's Curse. I just love the punk aesthetic. Although, bold choice of Maberry to make a roller derby queen straight, or at least bi. Anyway, she had far less of a presence in this book than I remember as a kid. As a kid, I remember her being in most of the book, but she actually isn't in very many chapters in this. She does kind of contribute also to an issue where I felt like Tommy Amura was becoming a Mary Sue in this book, as he starts to feel a little too perfect at a certain point. That's a very minor complaint though, and those of you who've read the book will know why I say that. Anyways, I do love the expansion of the bounty hunter group, both in the good guys, but also the neutral and bad guys we see. But I guess I should really stop spinning my wheels. I like this book and you understand that I like this book, for most of the reasons I like the previous book as well. So I should probably go ahead and talk about the things that I didn't like about this book, the things I'm more critical about. Now, there were smaller issues that I could talk about, Like last book, there's a certain point where the book just sort of drags a bit, though I would argue that not nearly to the same degree in this one. For the most part, anytime I did start to get bored, to when it was starting to get hard to continue with the series, something would happen that it would draw me back in enough that I never quite got to the point where I was like falling asleep while reading it. And plenty of mysteries kept me going even when I did get to some of those boring parts. Like, yeah, this is really boring, but I do really want to see how this plot point resolves itself, so I'm going to keep reading. Again, this is largely minor complaints right here, so I'll go ahead and move on to bigger issues. And those are with the central theme carried over from the first book. And well, this book feels like it trusts its audience way less this time around. While I certainly can't blame the author for feeling that, considering my own comments on the book and talking about how the highest rated reviews on Goodreads about Rotten Rune felt like they completely misunderstood what the author was trying to say. I will say one of my favorite parts about going back on old books and reading them is finding the ones that never talked down to me as a kid. The ones that I can read as an adult and still feel like this book cares if I read it, and it's not just saying, oh, why are you here? Go away. This is for kids, dude. It's for kids. One great example of this that I did was Bridge to Terabithia, which handles the heavy subject material and themes even adult books can't always get right with excellent finesse, and it never once feels like it talks down to the audience that it's cultivating to, which was mostly children. On the other end, you had something like Grey Griffins, one of my earliest reviews, where I mentioned that was a novel that was aimed at kids and felt like it. Not only did it refuse to put its characters in what felt like genuine danger at any time, which, to be clear, is completely fair because most of them were kids, but the fact it doesn't trust its readers to really get what they're doing. Dust and the Decay falls a little bit too close to Grey Griffins than I liked. There are times when scenes will happen and the author provides plenty of context to understand what he's trying to say about a character or an event in the subtext, only for them to go on and then explain to the audience what he was trying to say with the subtext. I think a perfect example was when Morgie and Benny get in a fight just before he leaves Mountainside. So, let me find this for you real quick. I friggin' hate you, Benny. You pretend you're my friend, but you took Nyx, and now you're dumping me and going off together. You and that bitch, Nyx. Benny stared in total shock. Then he felt his own anger starting to rise. He scrambled to his feet. You can say whatever you want about me, Morgie, he warned, but don't call Nyx names. Or what? Morgie challenged, moving in almost chest to chest. Benny knew that Morgie could take him in a fight. Morgie was always the toughest of the crowd, the one who never backed down. He tried to stand up to Charlie and the hammer at the Riley house, and he nearly died for it. Morgie shoved him again, but this time Benny was expecting it, and all it did was knock him back a few steps. As he staggered, his heel came down on the fishing rod, and there was a sharp crack. They both stared down at it. They had caught 100 trout with that rod. They had spent thousands of hours sitting on the banks of the stream, talking about everything. And now it lay snapped in two pieces that could never be mended. Benny's heart sank. As symbolic incidents go, it had too much drama and no comfort at all, and he cursed the universe for making a joke like that at this time. Now, I read that a little bit wrong, admittedly, because brain foggy here, but why didn't Maberry trust the audience to pick up the fact that Benny stepping on this fishing rod and snapping it in half to the point it can never be mended again was a perfect metaphor for this fight, just snapping their friendship in half to the point they can never mend it again? Like, he outright spells it out in the book. This resembles their friendship, guys. Get it? It's a metaphor for their friendship, guys. Get it? That's what it feels like it's doing to me when I read this scene. There's another incident here. It's a little smaller, but it's when Chong meets White Bear, one of the big villains of this. The man lifted the booted foot and brought it down the side of Chong's face. Not a kick, no. The man placed the sole on Chong's cheek and slowly applied weight and pressure. Shh, now. I cut the gag so you can breathe. It wasn't no invitation to ask a bunch of questions you already know the answer to. Chong frowned, tried to tell him that he was wrong, but Chong didn't know the answers to anything, that this was all some kind of mistake. The force behind the boot increased bit by bit. At first it was only pressure, but soon there was enough weight to make Chong's jaw crack. Then more, and Chong started to cry out. more and more until he thought he would pass out. "I can keep this up all night," said the man casually, as if he was discussing the weather. "I'll stop when I don't hear any more noise coming out of your mouth. Chew on this thought for a minute, little man. A gag ain't the only way to keep you from talking. I can cut out your tongue, too. Nail it to a tree. Don't think for a moment I'm joking, because I've done it before, and to tougher specimens than you." Chong wanted to scream. Instead, he clamped his mouth shut tighter than the gag had been. The pressure continued. Chong squeezed his eyes shut and tried to find a place inside his head where he could go and hide. He wanted to be home, up in his room, surrounded by stacks of his beloved books. Back there, if a monster became too terrifying, Chong could always close the book. Not here. Not in the dark with the pain and the ropes and the gag. The pressure stopped increasing as the man listened for sounds from Chong. "That's the ticket," he said, and removed his foot, but not before giving it a last little extra pressure. Somehow, that made Chong feel more frightened. That last little bit of pressure. It was unnecessary. The man had already defeated Chong, already proved his power and dominance. That last twist spoke of a deeper, less evolved kind of ego, a sneaky pettiness, sly and dirty. It made Chong very, very afraid. I believe even the target audience would have understood the significance of White Bear digging his foot into Chong's cheek, even after he won, as a clear hint of White Bear's sadistic nature. We didn't need the additional paragraph where Chong outright tells us that White Bear is dangerous and evil and sadistic, because he did that. We got that, especially since this specific scene is a very common trope in media. A villain has someone at their mercy, the victim submits out of reluctance or fear, and even despite that, the villain is getting what he wants, he goes out of his way to inflict more harm onto them out of pettiness.
Sometimes you just gotta put your foot down when it comes to kids.
And there are many more examples throughout this book. It just doesn't trust the audience to understand the scenes anymore. And that was really disheartening to get on a reread. But I think one of the bigger things that made me grimace with this book is the furthering of its own theme and its message. Now, for those of you who watched my previous video, or went back and watched it after I suggested it, thank you so much, you would know that one of the things I went to bat over Rotten Room for was the fact that the theme of zombies were people too is not an inherently bad one. I pointed out that the book wasn't saying zombies are people, but that they were people. And that at the end of the day, zombies are effectively walking corpses who were once people with family and friends, who don't want their memories desecrated by sadists who just want to torture or play with the zombies as if they're toys. Even Tom's desire not to kill zombies until he's hired to do so, or forced to do so, makes some sense, as he defines himself as a closure expert. And he wants people to have a chance to give closure to their loved ones, rather than just cutting zombies down left and right, and never giving them that chance. And at the time, this was true. The book wasn't saying we shouldn't kill zombies, or that we should give zombies rights. It took a nice middle ground of saying that zombies aren't evil, they simply are. Humans are evil, because they know the pain they can cause, and still choose to do so. But zombies just exist, and are driven entirely by instinct. Like a dog. A dog's not evil. A dog's not really good either. It's just a dog. And I love my dog, but I wouldn't go out on a limb and classify her as morally good. Except, if I had read this book, I think I would have been agreeing with the people from the previous book. Because Benny Amura, zombies are not people. They were people. I can understand not wanting to desecrate them, to be disgusted when they're used as playthings or tormented by people who just get off on sadism. I get that. But please reel it back in. When you're saying that tricking zombies feels like playing a trick on a mentally handicapped person, you're stepping a toe far over the line of empathy into stupidity. No, I'm not kidding. Benny at one point says tricking a bunch of zombies away from a fence so they can get out without being torn to pieces feels a lot like tricking people who aren't all there upstairs. And this isn't the only time that I just kind of wanted to say, Benny, dude, shut the fuck up. There's zombies, man. Another example is when Benny and Lila and Nix get caught up in that horde. The way that Benny gets them out of that is he strikes a match and lights the zombies on fire, which works really well because they're all very dried out and, not well taken care of, greasy and all that. And then later on, he he's like in near tears about doing that, because if the zombies can even think as much as squirrels or feel that amount of pain, what I did was horrible. I'm a terrible person for saving my friends and my lives over the zombies. And it's like, oh my god, seriously, dude? They were gonna kill you. They were gonna tear all of you to pieces without a second thought to turn you into zombies. They aren't people. They were people. There's also another case, this one at least I can see from another perspective, but there's another case where they meet a group of people from the last book, named the Children of Lazarus. Now, in the last book, they were introduced as religious nuts who were convinced that the zombie apocalypse was part of God's plan, and that the zombies are the meek who shall inherit the earth that is spoken about in the Bible. So naturally, they revere zombies as a divine conclusion rather than terrible monsters. And in a nicer version of this trope, these people aren't the bad guys, at least not widely speaking. Most of them are just good, kind-hearted people who have this belief. They don't believe people should go out and be killing the zombies because the zombies are eventually going to inherit the earth. But they don't force anyone or themselves to become a zombie or to accept their beliefs. They just help people. If you've seen the South Park episodes making fun of Mormonism, for example, the depiction is very much like how Matt Stone and Trey Parker depicted the Mormon religion. The foundation of their belief is really stupid, but overall they are kind and generous as a society. This is not my opinions on Mormons, by the way. This is just how this is me summing up how Matt and Trey Parker portrayed them, just to be clear. So, when a group of these people that Benny knew from the last book get turned into zombies, implied to be by the villains, someone floats the idea of quieting the three people of this faith that they knew when they see them roaming about, and Benny is against it. After all, this is what the Children of Lazarus wanted, right? Except again, this is where I have to strongly disagree. I get the idea of respecting one's beliefs, but at a certain point, Benny has to realize that to respect this particular belief is endangering other people. Considering that a through line throughout this book is responsibility, you would think this would come up, but it doesn't. The children who were turned are still zombies, regardless of what they wanted or what they believed in their life. And leaving them to wander the waste or the rotten ruin, where tons of people know them, is actively endangering other people. This is like the debate between loving dogs. Yes, I love my dog. I wouldn't have 3 dogs if I didn't. I love them, I feed them, and I would fight for my animals for all that it's worth. But just because I love my animals, and I don't think anyone should be cruel to a dog, doesn't mean I'm going to turn a blind eye to a pack of vicious wild dogs that would be roaming the streets. If I were to see a rabid dog running around my neighborhood, I'm going to call the local authorities to come and deal with it. Why? Because these are still rabid animals that will harm other living beings when given a chance. That rabid dog may attack children, or may attack another dog. In order to ensure the safety of everyone, it's important to address it and not let it just wander about because, well, I really love dogs and I wouldn't want someone to put down my dog. I don't care if that rabid dog was someone's pet. I feel sympathy for it. I would feel sympathy for the owner. But I'm not going to let it keep running around because it's a danger to other people. And in this scenario, I'm not an authority on how to handle rabid dogs, so I would call someone who is. But Benny, Nix, and the 2 closure experts that they're with are the authorities here. They choose to let these people, who are in effect like rabid animals, continue to roam the waste because who they were before. And they don't give any credence to the idea that leaving him this way, that anyone that these 3 kill from now on as the zombies is completely on them. They're more concerned with the zombies than the people. And honestly, that's even kind of something that Tom falls into throughout the book too. At one point, I was kind of shocked because Tom goes out of his way to never kill a zombie unless he has to. But when it comes to people, Tom is just basically slice, like just killing them left and right. And without any real thought, he doesn't say, surrender and you'll live. No, at one point he literally just walks up to 2 people, and faster than the character in the eyes of can see, slices their necks, and then sheaths his sword. Again, he delves into Mary Sue territory here and there. But anyways, so it's a little hypocritical that we have Benny, Tom, Nix, and other people just not at all caring about zombies. That they won't hurt a zombie. They can't hurt a zombie. That's disrespectful. But when it comes down to it, they'll kill people without a second thought. Or at least seemingly without a second thought. I get it. He doesn't want to kill them, but he's doing it in this scenario because he has to. Because he knows that if he leaves them alive, people will get hurt. You see my point here? Honestly, I could even turn this into an argument that just because someone has a last wish doesn't mean you always have to respect it, especially when it brings grievous harm to others or brings great personal problems to yourself.
Will you do one thing for me?
Oh, anything, sweetheart.
Blow up the hospital.
Well, I said I'd do it.
Anyways, apart from that, I did like rereading this, but I did feel like the story was sort of pushing it with the themes of it this time around. It got a little too drunk on its own message and kind of delved into the point where it's like, okay, no. Now I agree with the critics of the first book. You're saying zombies are people too and deserve actually more rights than people. I did still like rereading this book, so in the end, I'd have to grant this book a 7 out of 10 that only just barely avoids a 6. And yeah, that's kind of the best way to sum up this book. It's 7 out of 10. It's still good to read. I would still recommend it to zombie lovers, people who want a more philosophical take on zombies, but with some caveats, with the acknowledgement that, yeah, this is kind of dumb, that it's almost offensive in certain points. Like I said, the Benny comparing zombies to mentally handicapped people was a point where I was like, no, that's not okay, dude. It's still a good book. It still has a lot going for it. It still has good mysteries. The ending is genuinely shocking and you don't see it coming. And there's a lot to it that's good. It's just these parts aren't so good. And I can't really speak to if it gets worse later on because, as I've mentioned before, this is where I kind of stopped reading this series. About 2000, not sure when Flesh and Bone came out. But this is the last one I read in the series. One day I'll continue the series on this channel and talk about the series that I didn't read. I actually have a plan to do the Lost sequels, where I go into sequels to beloved nostalgic classics of mine that I never got around to reading. One would be like Sunwing from the Silverwing series, or Firewing is the second one. It'd be the Firewing from the Silverwing series because I never knew that had follow-up books. I would read Flesh and Bone. I would read other things. I have a couple more on my thing. I just can't think of it right now. For all intents and purposes, this book is fine to read. Just be aware that I wish the book had been a little more careful with its messaging and not delve so far into the point where I was like, okay, why? This is dumb. Anyways, just remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure is worth having, even the bad ones. So later, everyone.